For the next couple of minutes, let's look together at one of the National Gallery's most sensational and significant Baroque paintings, Caravaggio's Supper at Emmaus, painted in 1601. This is a large painting. The figures are all life-size, and when you approach it, you're thrust right into the middle of this humble meal, where clearly something tremendously shocking has just happened. The man on the right, who we see in profile, thrusts out both of his arms in a gesture of surprise. His left hand, especially the thumb, protrudes out toward us, into our space, drawing us right into the scene. The man in the green tunic on the left is just as astounded. He's almost jumped right out of his chair. Look at the way that his right wrist is pressed against the armrest. And in one of my favorite passages, Caravaggio suggests his astonishment with the deep furrows in the man's forehead. We don't even have to see his whole face to imagine his wide-eyed stare. Another man, perhaps the innkeeper, stands looking on, impassive. He, for some reason, doesn't seem to be surprised at all. And then, in the middle of the painting, we have a young, beardless man bathed in light. All eyes, including ours, are on him. Caravaggio ensures this in several ways. By placing him at the pinnacle of a pyramid of forms that rise up from the painting's bottom corners. By cunningly using the shadow of the innkeeper to serve almost as a counterhalo, a penumbra of darkness. And by having the shaft of light that falls from the upper left corner illuminate his face, which is solemn with downcast eyes. This is a painting that is all about vision, about what it is to see and what it is to believe. The subject, of course, is biblical, drawn from the Gospel of Luke. The story goes that two of Christ's disciples were walking from Jerusalem, where Christ had just been crucified, toward the village of Emmaus. While on the road, they meet another traveler who joins them in their journey and listens to their tales of Christ's deeds and death. But when Christ's grave was opened after his death, they tell him there was nobody inside it. It was empty. When they arrive at Emmaus, the two disciples ask this fellow traveler to join them for dinner. And he sits down to break bread, and at the very moment that happens, and Caravaggio wittily half conceals the bread behind the roast chicken, the disciples, who have been prevented from recognizing Christ, are made to see who he truly is. What a moment of dramatic revelation. This man, who they've been chatting with for hours, is Christ, risen from the dead and sitting right there in front of them. With his unerring eye for narrative, Caravaggio has selected the most dramatic moment of the biblical story for his painting. Because in the very next sentence in Luke's story, Christ vanishes, he disappears. The moment in which the disciples see Christ is a hugely significant sliver of seeing, a fleeting moment in which vision begets belief. Painting, too, can call up belief, and Caravaggio's choice of this passage and the extraordinary way in which he chooses to represent it indicates how canny and astute an artist he was. None of us can see in the dark, and in this painting, as in many of the works that made Caravaggio famous in Rome around 1600, light plays a critical role. Caravaggio's use of light and dark, his chiaroscuro, serves a narrative function. The disciples and Christ's faces glow with light. They are visible to one another. The innkeeper, with his thumbs hooked into his waistband and his face lost in shadow, looks on, unseeing. He does not believe, and so he cannot see. The whole painting must have been carefully planned, and though no preparatory drawings by Caravaggio are known to exist for this or any other painting, it is very carefully composed. There are some suggestions of brushed-in painted underdrawing in brown tones, which Caravaggio must have used to lay out the composition. It is a meticulously finished painting, and the forms and contours don't overlap, indicating how precise the planning must have been. Technical imaging reveals just one major pentimento, or change to the composition. The knee of the disciple at the left was originally positioned in front of the carpet, hanging over the table. But at some point in the process, Caravaggio elected to move it behind, creating a long, unbroken horizontal line along the edge of the table, which is only divided dramatically by the edge of the tottering basket. And this opens up a space at the table for us, for the viewer. The painting is so exquisitely finished that the ground layer is hardly visible. The naturalism of the painting is heightened even further by the exquisite still life elements on the table. The basket of fruit, which rests precariously on the very edge of the table as if it's about to fall, is wonderfully closely observed. Caravaggio had trained in his early years in Rome as a still life painter, and he showcases his aptitude in the genre here. The fruit, some of it looking somewhat overripe, the roast chicken with its legs incongruously in the air, the woven basket, and the delicately patterned bowl and plate reward slow contemplation, but also, seen all at once, convince us of the reality of the scene unfolding around the table in front of us. When Caravaggio painted this extraordinary work, he was 30 years old. He had been born Michelangelo Merisi in the small town of Caravaggio in 1571 and arrived in Rome at the age of 20. He struggled for years, continuing his training and trying to strike out on his own, and eventually managed to attract the interest of collectors with paintings that he made for the open market. His great breakthrough came just 2 years before he painted the Supper of Emmaus, when he was given the commission for the Contarelli Chapel in San Luigi dei Francesi. The large-scale religious paintings he made there, which were unveiled in the summer of 1600, caused a sensation. Like the Supper at Emmaus, they depicted unidealized, normal-seeming people caught up in some of the critical moments of biblical stories, the divine as part of the ordinary world, which was a visual conceit reflective of the new spiritual values of the Counter-Reformation. Caravaggio's exaggerated use of light and dark in these works captivated artists and patrons in Rome and beyond, because artists traveled from all over Europe to Rome to train, and so his ascent to fame was staggeringly quick. The Supper at Emmaus was commissioned in 1601, just a year after that great commission, by Ciriaco Mattei, who was the member of a wealthy family who commissioned the Supper at Emmaus and 2 other paintings from Caravaggio in the space of just 2 years. Although it is a large religious painting, it was always intended to hang in a private picture gallery rather than a church, as its horizontal format would suggest. It soon ended up in the collection of the Borghese family, where it was seen by Bellori, one of the biographers of 17th century Italian artists. He disapproved of the representation of Christ as young and beardless, and indeed Christ was very rarely represented this way by the beginning of the 17th century. Caravaggio, however, seems to have been troubled by the logical inconsistency of the biblical tale, in which the disciples don't recognize Christ. In the Gospel of Mark, there's a reference to Christ appearing to the disciples in another likeness, as if in disguise. And perhaps Caravaggio, as astute as ever, is suggesting this by showing Christ in another guise, young and without the marks of his crucifixion, literally and visually reborn. Caravaggio's unique style inspired artists in Rome and across Europe, and his innovations, his stark contrast between light and dark, sometimes called tenebrism, were adopted and imitated. But soon his style fell out of fashion, and he became an art historical footnote, a flash in the pan, and nothing more. The reception of this work, which was given to the gallery in 1839, gives us some sense of the low esteem in which he was held in the 19th century. The painting had failed to sell at auction in London, and its owner gave it to the gallery several years later. In 1865, because space was lacking in the main galleries, it was hung in the gallery's entrance hall for a time. Now, of course, Caravaggio's monumental contribution to the history of European painting has been recognized, and the Supper at Emmaus is one of the most prized and famous paintings in the gallery's collection. And though it no longer hangs in the entrance hall, what painting could be a better introduction to the kinds of looking we do in art galleries? As Caravaggio shows us, seeing is believing.